Thank you, everyone. We're now live streaming. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Paul Prentice, Chair of this committee. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee undertakes pre-decision scrutiny of reports going to the Cabinet on the Council's policies, projects, budgets and services. We also have present at this meeting from the Cabinet, Councillor Alan Baldock, Leader of the Council, and I believe Councillor Connie Nolan as well, our Cabinet member for, sorry, I've forgotten Connie's full job title, but, another Cabinet member. There is one thing to be aware of this evening, is that the upstairs toilets are out of use. So please don't use the toilet upstairs, but use the accessible toilet downstairs instead. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening, but should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. And this meeting is being minuted, recorded, and will be uploaded to the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. And so we go to apologies for absence. Pippa, do we have any apologies this evening?
An apology has been received from Councillor Turnbull.
Any others from anyone else? No. And Pippa, do we have any substitutes?
Councillor Bothwell is present as a substitute for Councillor Turnbull.
Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Does Pippa have any in advance?
None.
No, I've got, I'll take Councillor Naomi Smith.
I have a dog and I walk it at Long Rock.
Did I see Councillor Auld as well?
I also have a dog and walk it at Long Rock, and I'm also an occasional park runner, which runs around Long Rock.
I see Councillor Flanagan.
I'll see your dog and I'll raise it to 2. I have 2 dogs. I don't walk them at Long Rock, but I do. I am an avid runner with Park Run, which I know is mentioned in the Long Rock part of the discussion tonight. So declaring that as a voluntary declaration.
Thank you. And Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, I have a dog and a cat.
Are there any other pets anyone wishes to declare at this point? Okay. And there are 2 public speakers for the meeting who will be heard directly before the relevant item. I think both of our speakers actually are speaking on item 6, which is the Dog Control Public Space Protection Order, PSPO 2024. So without further ado, we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January 2024. And does anyone have any comments they wish to make about minutes of the last meeting? They are approved then. Do we need to do a general assent? General assent? Thank you very much. Okay. So with those passed, then we'll move on to item 6, which is the proposed dog control Public Space Protection Order 2024, pages 13 to 79 of your packs. As I said, there are 2 public speakers who will be heard at the start of this item, as Gavin Sirkin and Alan Atkinson. And could we hear from Gavin first, and after that we'll go into the report of Marie Royal introducing this item. If he's not here yet, then we could probably take, if he does arrive, we can probably take him after. But in the meantime, could we ask Alan Atkinson to come to the speakers, public speakers desk, please? Yeah. Hello. You've got 3 minutes, and Pippa will give you a warning when the 3 minutes is up. All right. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, councillors. It's unusual that anyone will come and speak in favour of something which the officers are recommending. But the dog exclusion order at Bridge Recreation Ground has a peculiar and rather difficult history. I'm chairman of Bridge Parish Council, and Bridge Parish Council have obtained the use of that recreation ground for the residents of Bridge, but also for the residents of the entire district. It's paid for through our precept, the lease on that. So it's, if you like, our gift to the district. But what I would like very much is that you are quite clear that Bridge Parish Council, in particular, would like to see dogs excluded from the entire recreation ground. We believe that this had been done some years ago, only to find that upon your reviewing your local legislation, you decided that it wasn't sufficient. Therefore, I would like very much you to ensure that there is no mistake this time, that the exclusion extends to the entire recreation ground without allowing any dogs at all. We are beset with people who would like to walk their dogs there. Many of them don't come from Bridge, so therefore haven't paid for the space. But we as a parish council, have canvassed. We know what the people in Bridge generally, we think we know what the people in Bridge want, and we don't want the dogs there. The recreation ground itself currently has tennis courts on it, a kiddies play area, open recreational space that people use for parties and we use for our fete and for our various local celebrations. It has football pitches which are used across the district, tennis courts which benefit players from across the district. It's used by the kiddies after school. They come running out of school across our recreation ground. It's leased, remember, by Bridge Parish Council from the landowner at our expense. They come running across the recreation ground, which we're very happy to allow. They plant bulbs in the spaces. They come and play with it in their classes on that space. We don't want it fouled by dog poo. And I'm encouraged that so many of you owned up to owning dogs. I too own dogs. I'm a kennel club breeder of dogs. I live very close to the recreation ground. I very much do not want to see dogs on that recreation ground. It is a terrible thing to have to admit, but some dog owners are less responsible than we would like. We do not want events or even afternoon of kiddies spoiled by dog poo because irresponsible owners, or just negligent owners, or owners whose dog has run away and done something somewhere they haven't noticed, are going to spoil something for everyone. So if you can, please be entirely careful, be absolutely certain we do not want any dogs on that recreation ground, and we would like you, please, to enforce that legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, for your contribution. I'm not sure if our second speaker is here tonight. Is that Gavin Sirkin? If Gavin, would you like to come up and yes, please. Yeah. You've got 3 minutes, and we'll give you a little reminder once that time is up.
Good evening, everyone. So Long Rock, I don't know if everyone knows it, but it's not a recreation ground. This is an area of countryside, really, in Swalcliffe. It's been that way for decades. We've lived near there for, going on 30 years, always walked our dog off the lead. Just to give you a little insight, we have a neighbour, Wendy Snellgrove, who's a pensioner. She lives on her own. She's in her late 70s. She walks with her Labrador cross, a rescued dog called Rosie. I was chatting with Wendy. She knew nothing about this. She walks with her dog off the lead. And she wrote a note to me ahead of this meeting, and she said, I'd be interested to find out about this consultation because I wasn't consulted. I didn't know anything about it, this dog control order. She said it's outrageous that they compare it to Botany Bay. We're the only piece of land where you can actually walk a dog, and it's in constant use both by people, by dog walkers, by everyone, and it should be inclusive. If you read the consultation document, you'll see that there was a note in there from Dogs Trust. Well, first of all, actually, let me just tell you that the results of the consultation document show that 75% of those consulted said dogs off leads do not affect their lives a great deal. So the vast majority of people do not want this. The Dogs Trust, in their consultation response, said the Dogs Trust would urge the Council to consider Animal Welfare Act 2006 requirements of the duty of care for a dog to exhibit normal behaviour patterns. This includes the need for sufficient exercise to run off the lead in appropriate areas. The Council should ensure that there is an adequate number and variety of well signposted areas for owners to exercise their dogs off leads. Dogs Trust enthusiastically supports dogs on leads by direction orders, i.e. if a dog is out of control, then that should be something that is ordered, but not a blanket way. In that area, there is no other area whatsoever for dogs to go off lead. I have a rescued greyhound. If she can't run off the lead, then really you're restricting her life. She's miserable. And we don't want that. We're a dog-loving nation. Please don't enforce this on residents. Look at the language of the consultation document. It says about that this will be enforced if dog owners this won't be enforced rather if dog owners are behaving. The language of it is extremely divisive, which pits people against dog owners. We don't want that.
If you could wind up, that would be great. Sorry.
Yeah. What people want in the local area is just to use this land, as they always have been, have some inclusive signage that shows that there are areas that you want to be careful of in particular seasons, particularly the winter. Keep dogs away from the shore, keep them on the grass,
Thank
away.
you very much.
And that's what we will take notice of. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'll ask Royal to give reports.
You, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Alan Atkinson and also to Gavin Sirkin for taking the time to come to the meeting and give your opinions. What I would say is public space protection orders are a tool to address antisocial behaviour in areas. There is a legal process to follow to create a public space protection order, and we have followed that process in terms of formulating the proposals that you see before you tonight. As part of that process, there has been consultation. I think Gavin mentioned about the consultation, and just to confirm to councillors tonight that the consultation period was open. It was open online. We did 3 public meetings. It was promoted through social media. So we have tried to reach people through the consultation and offered that face-to-face opportunity as well. I think with the public space protection order, what I would say is that this isn't a new thing. Since 2016, when it was previously dog control orders, we've had orders in place to help people enjoy shared spaces. As part of the consultation process, what I would say is that we have listened to the feedback and we have made concessions and adjustments from the previous iteration of the order, which was back in 2021. So as you'll see from the report, and you know, I'm not going to run through the details within the report. You've all had the report. What I would say is that we believe we have put forward some recommendations that are a proportionate response to the issues raised. We have added in new areas, so as our chairman of Bridge Parish Council has pointed out, we have included the new area of Bridge Recreation Ground, and that is to recognise the fact that it's a shared community space. There are community events going on, and we recognise the use of that area. We've also removed areas as part of this process. So we've taken off areas where there was previous ambiguity, places like the Riverside Walks, where actually we've had no complaints about dogs on lead, dogs off lead. So we have responded to the consultation in a fair way. We've also taken off areas that were previously play areas with play equipment. They no longer have play equipment. So part of that process is taking areas out that it no longer applies to. With Long Rock, we have worked very closely with Martin Hall, who's here tonight to talk about the Long Rock Management Plan. It is a triple SSI area. There are more sensitive areas than others where there are nesting birds. And what we've done as part of this process is enabled the use of area outside that most sensitive area for dog walkers to have dogs off lead. So we've tried to compromise as best we can through this process. As well as the change in areas, previously we had a requirement for a dog owner to actually provide to officers that they've got a means to pick up. We're proposing not to include that in the future order. Most dog owners are responsible dog owners. They carry the means to pick up, and there is a requirement in the order to pick it up anyway. So we are removing that requirement as part of the process. And the other thing that I would say as well is that there are some areas in the previous order, which we are including, which have no walled or fenced boundaries. So it's hard for people using those areas to actually understand, you know, is my foot in the area that I'm supposed to have a dog on a lead, or is it an area where I shouldn't have a dog on a lead? Is the dog allowed in this area? So as part of this process, we are attaching maps to areas where there is no clear parameter around those areas to make it clearer for the public to understand where they can and can't go with their dogs. We're also going to have a series of maps on our website which show the areas that restrictions apply to, and we'll also show the many areas that the restrictions don't apply to. So in response to the Dogs Trust response to the consultation, you know, they were very much like, we understand there are areas where you would exclude dogs, but actually it's really important that dog owners have areas that they can use. And when you look at the coverage of the coastal PSPO, the requirements only apply to 2% of that coastline. So it's proportionate to the areas that we're covering. And that's basically a summary of the report. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So the recommendation to Cabinet is the adoption of a new dog control public space protection order 2024 as set out in Appendix D, which includes requirements relating to dog fouling, dog on lead of no more than 2 metres as per locations listed in Schedule 1 of Appendix D, direction given to place dog on lead, dog exclusion as per locations listed in Schedule 2 of Appendix D, and secondly, to include the new site of Bridge Recreation Ground as a dog exclusion area, as set out in Schedule 2 of Appendix D. Thirdly, to not include in the new order dog lead restrictions at the following sites: paths of the Riverside Walk, the public footpath within Whitstable Cemetery in Whitstable. Then also dog exclusion at the following sites, which would not be included in the order. That includes the play area at the Maltings, which is an enclosed play area in Littlebourne, the play area on Black Griffin Lane in Canterbury, and Surrey Road Community Park Garden area in Northgate. And finally, the requirement of a person in charge of a dog on land to which the order applies to produce, if asked to do so by an officer, a suitable means to pick up, remove, and appropriately dispose of dog faeces. Could I invite a seconder for that, please? Councillor Flanagan, thank you. So we'll open debate. Do I see anyone who wishes to start us off? Councillor Dan Smith, and then I see Councillor Naomi Smith. Could you, sorry.
Again, there we go. I could have projected actually, if you just said. But just a quick question from Marie. The way the consultation was advertised, you mentioned social media, which obviously quite a lot of people are either selective or they don't deal with social media. And you mentioned obviously the council website. Just wonder if you could check with the other people, because I believe one of the speakers mentioned an elderly lady who possibly was not engaged in those processes and consequently didn't know, which...
Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to come back with more as well, unfortunately. Sorry. The majority of dog owners are responsible and considerate, is recognised as considerate, and it orders to ensure that the minority who do not act responsibly are accountable for any negative impact for the quality of life. We can all agree with that, and we all know what it's like when you have to deal with those that don't pick up. But one of the things is that what is a dog under control and a dog on the lead, because I think they're two different things. And the other one is on page 90. It's about appeals. Appeals against a new PSPO can be lodged. Last time I looked, when a PSPO was given to one of my residents, there was nothing on our website on how to lodge an appeal. It was very draconian. It was, you pay this or else. There was no where to write to. There's nothing on the fixed penalty notice or where to write to, and any way of her to appeal. So she paid up. She now feels like she's criminalised by it because she's 82, and really was low-hanging fruit for that NES officer at the time. I have been told that since then there's been retraining, and I hope that is the case. So I just want to make sure that we put on our website ways that people can appeal if they feel that they've been unfairly given a fine.
Thank you. Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. First of all, just for clarification, Mr. Atkinson's words earlier. So just to clarify, we are looking at including the whole of Bridge Recreation Ground within this order. Is that correct? So it's not part of it, it's all of it?
I'll ask Marie to clarify that, but it does...
I think that's right. I just wanted to clarify,
in the
just to be
paper,
clear. Yeah, based on the words from the speaker we had. Secondly, on Long Rock, so for our second speaker tonight, so I'm just looking at the agenda for tonight. It seems to be then that the move here for dogs on leads is very much driven by the fact that this is a treblisized site and this is about nesting birds. And so have there been incidents of dogs attacking nesting birds, occurrences of that? Is that what's driven us to this particular point where we've decided, at least here, the recommendation being that dogs need to be on leads in this area, please?
Okay, Marie, would you like to come back?
Thank you for your question. So with the consultation, Yes, it was online. Yes, we've advertised through social media. We've done other public events previously around engaging with the dog walkers. And anybody who's shown an interest, we actually kept a list of those people and flagged the consultation with them. So that's the process that we've used. The idea of doing the public meetings and doing the face-to-face sessions, we put posters up and we did some pop-ups along the coast as well to promote the events and the consultation too. In terms of the appeals, so there are two types of appeals. There's an appeal against creating the new order. So anybody can challenge the new order within the first 6 weeks, and that would go through the courts. If an individual disagrees with the fixed penalty notice that has been given, then they can request a review of the issue of that ticket. That review is conducted by a council officer in conjunction with the third party provider if it's a contractor that's issued the fixed penalty notice. There's a review of body cam footage, there's a review of the incident, and it's a fair and measured response to that. If somebody wants to formally appeal the fixed penalty notice, then again that is through the court process if they disagree with that fixed penalty notice. Yes, to confirm, it's all of Bridge Recreation Ground that will be included in this order, and with the nesting birds, it is about reducing the risk of reducing the species that are there and present on site. And I don't know whether my colleague Martin would like to come in at that point.
Go for it, Mark.
So, Long Rock is complex. It really is a complex site, has many, many designations, but I'm not going to do my whole speech now. I'll save that for next item. With respect to disturbance, evidence of disturbance to nesting birds, due to the amount of disturbance there is across the site, actually there are very few nesting birds. There's certainly no nesting birds of interest. The SSI primarily is a designation around wintering birds. So like a lot of the estuary here, we get about, across the Thames estuary, Medway swell, about 300,000 birds coming in each winter, which come from Siberia and many other places and use the area for feeding, roosting and what have you. They don't breed here. So the birds that we were particularly concerned about with disturbance, things like the Brent geese, the turnstones, things like that, they're winter visitors, and it's it's during those winter seasons which is particularly important for those to decrease the disturbance. Many surveys have been undertaken with respect to providing evidence for the establishment of things like, in this area, Birdwise East Kent, which was established a few years ago. And there's a lot of evidence about this site and other sites and about the impact, what they call major flight, on those birds due to people and particularly dogs off leads.
I've just got a question that follows up from, I think it was Councillor Naomi Smith's question. I might be mistaken, it might have been another one. But if individuals want to request a review, you mentioned that they have to formally go through the courts. Is there an ombudsman type body that people can go to, as there would be in, say, if you were, I know in some other sort of sectors and some other services you could go to an ombudsman, but I don't know if something like that exists for something like this.
So with a PSPO and the breach, it's actually a criminal offence to breach it. So the route for appeal is through the courts. I think going back to Councillor Naomi Smith's point, the issue about the website and what we advise people, we can look at that and we can change that and make it more user friendly.
I think that would be quite a good thing to minute sort of formally as a request from the committee, because user friendliness is quite easy to achieve. Councillor Mackenzie, then Councillor Auld.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually talking about the dog controls and PSPOs in a Hurston Parish Council recently, and what some of the Hurston Parish councillors were concerned about was how this would be made aware to people. So like if this gets passed through, then how will you be notifying people that this PSPO has become a thing? Will there be signs, and and how big will the signs be? Because I see some of the PSPO signs that you see on lampposts and things, and I personally think they're really small. They're very easy to miss, and they're very easy to ignore. And another thing I'm worried about is that changing a rule like this, and people like Councillor Smith who walk their dogs on Long Rock, they may be unaware of this change. They may not look at the sign because they've done it a million times before, so they're used to it. And then they get slapped with a fine because they didn't know. So will there be a warning system? So like if someone does it once, then the officers will say, just to let you know, this has come into effect. So
Take Councillor Old next.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the enforcement, much like Councillor Mackenzie. So if the enforcement officers are third-party contractors, they may not necessarily be direct council employees. There was a rumour amongst dog walkers on Long Rock, which I frequent very often, that there was an incentive for the enforcement officers to issue fines because they received a proportion of the fine. Is there any truth in that?
Yeah, Marie.
So just coming back on both of those 2 points, really good points about the signage, etc. With the PSPO, there will be an implementation plan. So we will be looking at signage. We're changing signage all the time in terms of making it more accessible, making it more user-friendly, making it more visual. And part of this order, it is about attaching maps to areas with clear areas that people can see what they can and can't do. So we will pick up that public awareness raising as part of the implementation plan. When we are looking at bringing in a new order, as part of that implementation plan as well, it's about training staff. So it's about upskilling staff, making sure staff are clear about what they are enforcing and what they're not enforcing. And there's always a lead-in grace period to raise awareness. If there is a significant change, to say, look, this has changed, this is the new requirement, this is how it applies. So it is about engaging with the public first, doing that education, doing the engagement and changing behaviour, because this PSPLs are not about penalising people, catching people out. It's about nudging responsible behaviour. In terms of our third-party contractors with a PSPO, it can either be council officers, police officers or nominated officers by the council. So we do have a third-party contractor that issues fixed penalty notices. They are on a salary. They're not on an incentive-based scheme. There is definitely no incentive to issue FPNs. And you know, we work with them, we train our contractors to apply PSPOs and other requirements in a measured and consistent way. And, you know, as part of that review process, if we've got somebody who is overzealous, who, when we review the footage, are not acting appropriately, we tackle that with the contractor. And the contractor has worked with us in the few cases that we've had to change officer behaviour. So we, you know, the contract governs how they operate, and we work with the contractor to make them work in a way that we're happy with.
Councillor Buckman, then Councillor Carnac. Councillor Smith after that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it was, I was looking back in October last year, I must have contacted, I think it was Lacey Dixon about certain things. And I did have a report which might be interesting to everybody. So they do get a monthly report which captures a breakdown. This was about litter. The breakdown of litter type, locations, age and ethnicity, to mention but a few categories, which allows them to monitor the performance and equality of the people. So I take it that will still stand for the dog bit. what would be nice, I think I mentioned before, is to see one of these FPA notices, mainly to see how it's set out, whether the instalments option is clear and the actual size of the font, so it's legible to everybody. There's another thing about, the signage. I know how Councillor Mackenzie mentioned about the visibility of the signage, but also the height at which they're put at, because you get many people in sort of in their wheelchairs, walking dogs or electric wheelchairs, and so the signs have to be at a certain height so they would be able to read them. And then obviously the cost of the amount of signs, and obviously lots of them would be needed in. I think you mentioned Toddler's Cove, so there's lots of entrances and ways in. So how would it stand if you entered Toddler's Cove but didn't pass a sign? And then also the last thing was, who picks it up, the mess? If they don't have a bag or anything, what happens then? Thanks.
Councillor Carnac next.
Yeah, thank you very much. We all received an email from Barham Parish Council during the week. Can you tell us what's happening with that? And then I wanted just to ask as well, and it might be more for Martin Hall in the next section, I don't know, but dogs on the lead, particularly say at Long Rock, do we have any compensation in dogs off the lead areas? Because we know that we were looking at a scheme a couple of years ago where Birdwise would finance a dogs off the lead area, which meant that we could try to encourage people not to take their dogs on the beach, particularly in the winter months when birds are overwintering. So I wonder if there's some compensation there that could be done. And I agree on the problem of removal of notices and where the areas are covered, where we've got some, and particularly I know in Reculver last year, people were being fined when they were eating in a perfectly safe spot for dogs, and they were being fined, and that caused all sorts of problems. So I agree with Councillor Smith. We had a few issues on the coast, and I know they were sorted out, but I am worried. And then the final thing I'd say is that having been badly bitten by a dog, fortunately, unfortunately, but it wasn't actually out in the open. But that's made me very scared of dogs now. And a lot of people are scared of dogs. And I think while, we have to balance this, there are people that have dogs and want to exercise their dogs. And of course, they want their dogs to run off the lead free. But that also needs to be balanced. And I think particularly in recreational areas, and particularly where there are children, not everybody likes to have a dog approaching them, and they can be really petrified of that, and particularly if you've had an incident with a dog. So I'd just like to speak up for those of us who live in this district who have been badly injured by dogs and don't really appreciate going out and having dogs. I know people always say my dog's lovely, but actually if you're petrified of dogs, dogs approaching you and coming up to you. And so I'm particularly keen, although I'm sure everyone knows my views, I'm not keen on PSPOs, but I do think there are places for them. Thank you.
We'll take Councillor Smith and Councillor Flanagan, but there's quite a few points raised there, so I'll come back to those questions if I may.
And thank you for raising Barham, Councillor Carnac. I was going to bring that up later on. Would you like me to address it now?
It's probably appropriate to address it now.
Fabulous, thank you. So after the consultation finished, it was actually only Tuesday, the 27th of February, we received communication from Barham Parish Council, and they would like their village green, the requirements downgraded, to phrase it. So at the minute, the Barham Village Green has a dog ban on the whole area, and they want to replace that with dogs on lead. What we would need to do is go back out to consultation on that change. So my recommendation is that you proceed, give comment and feed recommendations through the process for this dog control PSPO, and that we commit to doing further public consultation in response to Barham Parish Council's request. Thank you. Going back to Councillor Buckman's points, Toddler's Cove, yes, it's not a boundaried area. There are no clear parameters, so we are going to have to look to make sure that we put signs in a strategic way to make sure that people entering from various points can actually see them. And again, that's one of the reasons that we're attaching maps to areas so that we're very clear with people where it applies to. In terms of what happens with the mess, if a dog does his business and nobody's got a means to pick up, then officers who are out and about do have bags and carry bags with them, so they are able to pick it up if they come across it. In terms of alternate areas for dogs off leads, you know, part of the report talks about the compromise at Long Rock in that, you know, there is a protected area, but there's now a grassland area at the side of it where dogs can go freely and not be on lead. There's also a green field beside that particular area and to the back of that area.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Naomi Smith and then Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to come back to Long Rock. Hi, Martin. I understand the sensibilities at Long Rock. It is a very special site, and for overwintering birds, and they do come a long way to eat the mud. And if you can imagine, every time you go to eat a mouthful of food and something starts dashing at you and making you frightened and makes you jump up, you're going to get pretty exhausted and not be able to replenish yourself with the food that you need to fly all the way back to Siberia. This is the Brent geese to mate with, and they stay in families. They come in families and go back in families. And to survive up there, they need a good lemming population. It's all complicated. I won't go into the details. But I have spent a lot of time at Long Rock. It's one of my favourite places. I take my dog there. I bird watch there. I know the patch bird watchers there. And I think to single out dog walkers as the only disturbance there is quite difficult. We do have 2 PSPOs that can be applied. And they could be applied to dog walkers who don't have their dogs under control, who do disturb wildlife, and the kite surfers, or the park runners, or the mass of families who came the day after Boxing Day. I mean, there was hundreds of people down there because it was sunny and the tide was out. And they all go out on the long section of the beach. So they'll have walked quite a long way on beyond the groin. So any signage they would never have seen, because you can't put signage in the sea when the tide's in. But, and the 2 PSPOs we have is remove, damage, deface or vandalise the land in the restricted area, or any fixtures, fittings, flora and fauna therein. So that's covered there. And then G, this is the other coastal PSPO, harm or attempt to harm any wildlife. So these 2 could be applied to people who don't have their dogs under control, who don't have, and to people who are, the kite surfers are particularly a nuisance because they go around where there's lots of spits out there where the birds roost. When it's windy, the birds have to hunker down. And this, I mean, so you do get this, if you're a small bird, if you're a ringed plover and you've got a great big kite surfer coming to you, you just think that's prey and you scoot off, use all your energy, and then this is how the birds decline, populations decline. So I would suggest that rather than putting the 2-metre lead, that we look at the existing PSPOs and look at it about making sure you have your dog under control. And I know when we come on to the management plan, there are measures that could help protect very specific part where the hog's fennel is, and because we've also got insects there that are very, and if we've got somebody who's deliberate, there is a chap who goes there with his spaniels who deliberately flushes them into the scrapes. He's been told several times. I once told him, and I got a lovely mouthful of Anglo-Saxon from him, as have some of the others, and when he turns up, it would be quite good for him to get a big fine. We just don't know at what time. He never comes regularly enough. So that would be my proposal, is that we use the existing PSPOs.
Councillor Flanagan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on page 46 of the agenda tonight, this is the feedback from the Dogs Trust, and they raise an interesting point right at the top of the page, which says, we urge the Council to consider whether an adequate number of disposal points have been provided for responsible owners to use. By disposal points, I'm assuming they mean dog bins. And so as part of this, are we also going to review, or will there be some work to look at where we have dog bins at particular sites across the district, at recreation grounds, parks and so forth, where dogs are allowed to be walked? Because if we're trying to encourage people to pick up after a dog, it's great to have the accessibility of a bin there. And I use the example in my ward of Church Street Plainfields, where there is provision at the front of the field, nothing at the back end, where there is an access point, and there's often quite a build-up of bags there, which can, as you know, can be very unhygienic and very messy. So as part of this, will we be reviewing that to make sure we've got enough dog bins in place? My understanding is that bags can be put into normal litter bins. Is that correct? Yeah. Glad you're nodding. Thank you very much. I've done the right thing. But perhaps as part of that, we can get that message out as well, and as part of an overall review to make sure there is enough provision there. So we're encouraging people to use them rather than leaving bags behind in a hedge or on the ground.
I think it would be quite good to clarify actually on the bins whether dog waste is acceptable, because not everyone understands that it is acceptable. Should I just take Councillor Smith, another follow-up?
I've got a very quick answer on that, because we've just done it in my local park. There's a sticker that they put on the bins that says, put your dog poo here as well.
Do you want to come back? Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of your comments were noted. I think in terms of the dog bins, if you feel it's a concern, we can take that away and pick that up and have a discussion with our contracts officer.
Councillor Butman.
So yeah, just to carry on what Councillor Smith was saying earlier on. So because it's going to be quite difficult to measure a 2-metre lead unless you're sort of side on from the dog. So how would you go about, like more of a process thing of trying to amend that part of it, the lead, to being more to the dog being under control?
And any other? No, I don't think there's any others at the moment. Maria?
Yeah, I mean, with the lead length, with the consultation, some people were saying, it should be shorter, dogs should be within reaching distance of the collar for an owner to control them. Some others were saying it should be longer. So the 2 metres is what we've got now. It seems to work, and it's a compromise in terms of, some people want it shorter, some people want it longer.
Councillor Smith, then should I take Councillor Bothwell first, as he's not spoken yet, and then Councillor Smith?
Thank you very much. Yes, I had a question about in relation to the rules that are going to be applied, whatever is agreed by Cabinet in due course. I'm very confused about what the current rules are on Long Rock. As I think are many residents in the area, they don't really know what the rules are, partly because the signs have been defaced or removed. And firstly, I would say that they should be, very robust and vandal-proof, so that any new signs that go up are are likely to be seen by people, not invisible. They're currently behind a bit of kind of misted up plastic and impossible to read, even if you get down really close. So that's very important. So it's imperative that the rules are clear. And I had a question about what the current PSPO for Long Rock requires. Does the current PSPO require dogs to be kept on a lead on Long Rock? And so this proposal doesn't actually change that, is that right?
Would that be something Marie wants to respond to? Yeah, and I'll take Councillor Smith's question, then Marie can come back on both.
I'm not quite sure about processes, so that's why I wanted to ask. Could we recommend that at Long Rock it's dogs under control? Take a vote on that. I mean, I don't know whether we do that in this committee. So it's dogs under control and not on a 2-metre lead. I mean, can we do that?
I'll ask Marie to come back on that point.
We would have to go back out to consultation. So if that's something that you're recommending, it can be considered by Cabinet. Just for clarification, the decision making for this sits with full council. So your comments go on to Cabinet. Cabinet make recommendations, but it's full council who make the final decision. If you are wanting to change any aspect of the contents of this order, we would have to go back out to public consultation. Unless you're reducing. Yeah, unless you're reducing the area.
Okay, are there, sorry, Councillor Bothwell.
Yeah, my question hasn't been answered, I don't think.
Ask Marie to come back on that one as well. Apologies.
Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry, just Councillor Bothwell's.
Yeah. So with Long Rock, the change is that the grassland area is not a restricted area. It's dogs off lead in that area. So we are being clearer about which area this applies to. Attached to the report is a sample map. So one of the appendices to the report is a sample map, and that gives you a sort of indication of what the signs will look like. So the maps will show areas where it's dog on lead, areas where it's dog exclusion, and areas where there are no requirements that apply. And you are quite right in terms of the signage being robust. And it's something that we need to look at as part of the implementation plan. But picking up your point about making sure people understand it and what the requirements are, then that will include that engagement period before enforcement starts. So again, we will pay particular attention to this area and make sure we do that engagement and awareness raising as part of any process.
Councillor Bothwell, then Councillor Dan Smith.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you said that there is a current PSPO that requires dogs to be kept on a lead in the Long Rock area and on the SSI, and you're just reducing the size of that area in this current proposal, so that the main nature reserve, if you can call it that, still has the same, will have the same rule that it has at the moment. So it's no change. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much. Just to, quickly to clarify, Mr. Atkinson and I think Councillor Flanagan also both mentioned the wording on the Bridge Recreation Ground. Just a recommendation that the wording is actually put to be as the whole of Bridge Recreation Ground. I think you mentioned that was actually in the consultation, and because your answer was that Marie was that is the whole. So it was just to be absolutely clear, because I think there was some confusion in the past that would alleviate going forwards. Thank you.
I think that's something we can definitely clarify and make absolutely clear when we put our recommendations to the Cabinet. Are there any others who'd like to speak? Councillor Carnac.
Yeah, just very quickly. back on Long Rock with the dog-free area is the area around the Oyster Bay Trail. I'm just looking at the map there. How are we keeping dogs in that area? Is there, how is that going to be managed? Because it's quite, it could be quite difficult, couldn't it, to actually ensure that dogs are in that specific area?
You'd like to come back on that, Martin? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Carnac. So the areas we suggested is the most sensitive area. So that's the area where we're talking about dogs being on leads. We're not actually looking at initially physically demarcating that area because that was something that the local people were actually quite, against having additional fencing and things like that up there. So part of the reason for having the what would be the southern boundary is around the edge of that oyster trail, is that you've got that physical concrete barrier. We have looked and have got getting some costings for putting a sort of low knee rail around that area just to help doubly demarcate it. But we're not looking at fencing it anywhere else. It would just be down to signage.
Good, thank you, because there were previous ideas to fence that off, which were not very good. So I'm glad to hear it's not fencing.
I think it looks like everyone who's wanted to speak on that item has spoken. So, oh, sorry, Marie.
If consideration wants to be given by this panel around Long Rock and around making further amendments, we could look at seasonality around the restrictions, and if there are particular times that it should apply, but we could look at that.
Martin?
It's definitely something that came up at the public meeting we had on the 31st of January. One of the issues of this is looking at the entirety of the ecological complex, so to speak, of Long Rock. So we talked very much about birds being winter. That's absolutely spot on. So the triple SI is very much around that. I nearly said annoyingly, it's not annoying, it's something to celebrate, but the site is also something called a special area of conservation, which is actually a more important designation than the triple SI, because it's a European-wide one, and that's actually for a moth and hog's fennel, which grows in the grass areas. Some of the concerns we've had from groups that know about those species, which I know less about, is that also, there can be considerable damage and disturbance as dogs running through those areas. So seasonality for the birds work, and it may be something we'd need to monitor going ahead to see whether that seasonality also worked for the special area of conservation with the fisher's estuarine moth and hog's fennel. So the site has different interests at different times of year, all of which disturbance can have an impact on. I hope that's clear. So
Councillor Smith, Naomi Smith.
About process again, sorry. If we're coming to vote on this, it's a sort of all or nothing vote, isn't it? And that's making it very difficult for me to vote on. I mean, whilst I don't disagree with anything else in here, I am concerned about the Long Rock stuff. But it's not separated out like that.
We can take separate votes on each of these.
Yeah,
items.
the trouble is like I think the dog lead restrictions aren't for Long Rock aren't in option 1. It just says dog exclusion as per locations listed in Schedule 2 of Appendix D, which I guess is where it is. Is it there?
I think Susie's just going to respond to that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think what we can do is take a vote on all of the others and take a separate additional vote on Long Rock specifically, because it's obviously an area of particular interest to members of the group.
So what I propose is that we, I'd like to just get a feel from the committee as to whether we take all of these as one and then have a separate vote on Long Rock. So that's we can do a vote on, just a second. Okay, I'm going to suggest after consultation that we take on your papers the recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that we also have a separate vote on Long Rock because that is clearly of interest to the committee. And I think, the feeling I'm getting is that people would be happier with treating that separately. Do I see murmurs of approval for that way forward? Yeah. Councillor Carnac.
Also, Chair, where are we going to add asking for Barham to go back out to consultation?
Think we've specifically, I'm going to specifically ask that is included. I had a conversation earlier on with Marie about that, and I think we all agreed that would be something this committee would like to go forward. Susie?
Yeah, just to say, as ever, because this is overview and scrutiny, obviously you're making recommendations. In addition to any vote, we will also be relaying the spirit of the conversation that's been happening, including the actions around Barham and making changes to the website in terms of the FPNs. We had a look while you were talking and we agree.
So,
Councillor Smith, Naomi Smith.
yeah, do we need an amendment putting forward about Long Rock to maybe go back out to consultation with Barham?
Now, I think what we're going to do is take 1 to 4,
Right.
excluding Long Rock,
Okay.
and then we'll come up with some words for Long Rock, and then you can take a vote
Okay,
on that.
thank
Probably
you.
the way to do it.
Just to clarify, we're taking 1 to 4 right now, and then we'll come back to Long Rock immediately after we voted on that. So the recommendation to Cabinet, I won't read it again. It's all on your papers, but it is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Unless I need to read it again. I don't think I need to read it again because I read it at the start of the item and councillors can see it in front of them. We need to do that by recorded vote or general assent?
Does anybody wish to vote against
Does anyone wish to vote against
or abstain?
or abstain? We will do general assent by show of hands. And that looks unanimous, or almost unanimous. I think that was unanimous, wasn't it? Yeah. Great. I just making sure I'd seen all the hands. So for the vote on Long Rock, what we are putting to the committee is, let's just get Okay, so the next vote then, we are going to vote on whether to recommend to Cabinet the adoption of a dog PSPO as set out in the report with regard to Long Rock, with specific regard to Long Rock. And we can do that by recorded vote. I'll repeat that. We're going to vote on whether to recommend to Cabinet the adoption of a dog PSPO as set out in the report with regard to Long Rock. So specifically regarding Long Rock. And we're going to do a recorded vote on that. Okay. So whenever Pippa's ready. She has the fun bit for this.
Councillor Bothwell. Thank you. Councillor Buckman.
Against that.
Councillor Carnack. Councillor Carr-Ellis. Oh,
Abstain.
thank you.
Against.
Councillor Flanagan.
For.
Councillor Liv Harvey.
I'll abstain.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Against, please.
Councillor Moses.
For.
Councillor Old.
For.
Councillor Prentice.
Abstain.
Councillor Dan Smith. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Against.
Okay, that's 4 for, 4 against, and 3 abstentions.
I'm not going to change my vote as chair. And so it's 4 for, 4 against, and 3 abstentions. And that will be reflected in the report, which will go in our recommendations to Cabinet.
Can I just
Yeah,
ask?
go for
So
it.
that will be reflected as this was what was proposed and this was the result.
Yes.
So neither carried nor right. Okay.
Awkward though that sounds, that is where we are.
Okay.
Item 7 is the Long Rock Management Plan. And there are no public speakers for this. And we're going to consider the report of Bill Hicks, Service Director of Place, and Richard Moore. The officer who's going to present that to us tonight is Martin Hall. I'll invite Martin to make his introduction. Do I need to recommend first? Yeah, and we will be recommending, I propose we recommend to Cabinet that the Long Rock Management Plan option 1 be adopted. Do I see a seconder for that, please? Councillor Smith and Councillor Flanagan, that's great. And I'd like to open the debate. Martin Hall first, and then we'll open the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. So Long Rock Management Plan, I think we've heard a lot about how complex this site is and all the reasons why it does need a management plan. So the management plan that the team's pulled together is very much about coordinating and communicating the sort of management activity that is required on that site. So coordination is between ourselves, between foreshore, between archaeological groups, the local bird watchers, the people interested in the moths and the butterflies. There's so many interests on this site that we need to pull all that together in one place. And that's exactly what this management plan is there to do. And communication is really, really key. So it's communication, obviously, between those interested stakeholders, but also communication to the users and the local community who absolutely, they love the site and quite rightly so. The communication is not just about whether we are going out to cut back some scrub to encourage the grassland area and the hogs fennel, which is something we have to do occasionally, and to take back the brambles, but to actually communicate why is that important? Why do we need to do these things? What are the actual wildlife and the biodiversity benefits from doing that? What's the evidence behind it? So the management plan is a really important tool for us to do this. As a local authority, as a public body, under the Environment Act 2021, we do have a duty placed upon ourselves to look at enhancing the SSSI. So we had to have regard, we've always had to have regard for the SSSI, but recently under that Environment Act, that's been strengthened and as a much more positive and proactive act on a local authority around enhancing. And the role of the management plan is actually to demonstrate how we are going to be fulfilling that duty placed upon the local authority. We also, as you're aware, as a local authority, had our declaration of biodiversity emergency last year. And Long Rock is a real key site within tackling the decline of biodiversity across our area and demonstrating, as was set out in that declaration, the need to undertake key actions and raise awareness and what have you to bring these sites into positive management and to start to see what we call nature recovery. And that is very, very much where we want to go. So you could write a management plan in isolation. You could lock yourself in your room and write a management plan and then, hope that everybody would accept it. Well, that's not the way the local authority here has been working. We've had a number of public meetings. We've actually had 3 public meetings in total, talking through, we had 2 prior to the management plan, where we spoke to local people about different activities that could be undertaken on that site to address some of the issues and the challenges we have on that site. And Councillor Rachel Carnap referenced earlier about some of the disquiet about the idea of fencing areas instead of, as a way of excluding dogs and people from the most sensitive areas. It was a very obvious physical thing we could be doing. It was very unambiguous, so it would be there. But there were issues with local people, not wanting to feel that they were caged in, so to speak, and not wanting fencing coming across the site and additional urbanisation. Local people see this as, their last patch of wilderness, so to speak, in the wild area in this area, and they want to very much keep it that way. So we very much listened to that, and a lot of things that we were talking about doing from those first 2 meetings did not transfer across into the management plan. So the management plan has come, we're looking at alternatives, we're looking at things that we can actually do on this site through positive habitat management, increased awareness, better signage, which has been discussed many, many times. But I do want to reflect that the actual management plan really does, reflect back what we've been hearing from stakeholders and particularly from the public. And the management plan that we talked to people about on January the 31st down at the community centre, we actually amended that prior to coming to this meeting. So Rob Jenkins, my colleague, he did some very quick work on that, set up meetings with a couple of the particular groups around archaeology, coastal foreshore and things like that to make sure we're capturing their interests. And so the management plan that we are coming to yourselves with and will be moving forward with hopefully towards Cabinet, again, has already taken on board those findings. The management plan has a simple action plan within it. We feel it is very deliverable within the resources we've got, and it's a long-term plan, and we're hoping to see the SSSI and the other areas continue to be in favourable condition, and we certainly hope to see nature recovering on this site. But we're not expecting to see vast numbers of wintering birds suddenly, appearing on this site because of this work. We're certainly not expecting to see. Some people are hoping, through some of the actions we might be taking here, to see some key sort of breeding birds down on the shingle, like ringed plovers and little terns. The management plan, because of the nature of the actions that we think are suitable, and it's a sort of iterative, step-by-step basis, it's sort of, it's evolution on this site, so to speak, an ecological pun rather than revolution. So we are going to see improvements. The site will continue to strengthen, and if we implement this management plan, we are definitely staying faithful to our declaration of the biodiversity emergency, and we will be fulfilling our duty under the Environment Act. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone like to speak? Councillor Bothwell, and then Councillor Carnack, and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'd like to congratulate Martin Hall and Robert Jenkins on the excellent work they've done so far in preparing this management plan. They've clearly highlighted the critical importance of the wildlife habitat on Long Rock and have done extensive consultation work with the community on what we can see is a very sensitive matter. Thank you.
Councillor Carnack. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I concur with Councillor Bothwell. I think it's really good to see this management plan, and I hope that it's very good for Long Rock and very supportive of that area and nature. And as part of our biodiversity emergency, I hope that we'll see more of this across the district. I noted that there isn't a friends group, Martin, and what I would suggest is that local councillors get involved and ASAP get a friends group established, because that is one of the best ways of local people working together, and where we've heard this evening about the issues with dogs, and particularly, I mean, Reculver is quite similar in some respects, where you've got multi-use, you've got kite surfers, you've got a park run, you've got dog walkers, you've got bird watchers, you've got a lot of different activities all competing against nature at times, and a friends group is a really good way, as I say, of bringing the local community together, bring those interests together and actually be able to work with this management plan and make sure that the best is delivered for Long Rock. And if you are interested in doing that, we have a friends meeting with council officers coming up very shortly. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Smith.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, again, I'd like to echo actually what both Councillor Carnack and Councillor Bothwell have said. One of the things that struck me about this, 5.3 actually mentions this on the coastal processes, which I think is page 105 on the report, that this is a changing environment. It's going to alter over time, and we don't have the money and the resources to deal with that. So you just have to accept the changes as they happen. So one of the suggestions that I would make is actually to note in the going forwards, and perhaps with the friends group that Councillor Carnack mentioned, to treat this as the whole of the coast. You almost said this, I think, so it's talking about Reculver, but to treat the whole coastline as these linked areas, because as one adapts and changes due to the coastal shifts, another area may be opening up to the ecological impact that is affected in the first area. So you can't necessarily treat them in isolation. The sea doesn't really recognise our little local boundaries that we've put on an area, and it may be worthwhile having a sort of underlying template, if you like, to link them all together and perhaps include that in a friends group across the whole coastline there. Thank you.
Martin, would you like to come back, and then I'll take the other questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Carnack. On the Friends of Group, I think that's a very sensible idea. I'm aware of some of the very good activities that were undertaken elsewhere across the district. At the meeting we had in January, I think we had about 50 people turn up. And this time, and I think it was because of building of trust between them and ourselves, they could see that we were listening, we wanted to work with them. Many people wanted to share email addresses at the end of that so they could continue to be engaged. I think what a lot of people were saying was, I think they were a little bit scared about going straight to a Friends of Group, and that we may need to hold their hand a little bit first and have a couple of meetings and then maybe see if a Friends of Group emerges from that. But I definitely think working with the ward councillors, that would be a really positive thing to do. And the whole coastline, that's a really interesting idea. I was like, my brain would go, ooh, this is a really interesting one to think out. Coastlines, as you correctly state, Councillor, they are dynamic. We can't control them. We're at the moment, as you go down to Long Rock, we've got vehicles down there moving shingle from the west back to the east. And we're doing that in one or two other places within that coastal cell. We work very closely with foreshore and engineering, and I think it would be an interesting thing to look at to see what sort of appropriate document we could have that looks at the entirety of that coastline with respect to wildlife and coastal processes.
Thank you. Councillor Naomi Smith.
Yes, thank you. This is a really good management plan and it's great to see. I've got lots of questions, Martin. One of the, it's really nice to see one of the heroes of Long Rock, Andy Taylor's photographs throughout this. He knows this area really well and he understands how to balance the site for, as an amenity space as well as an SSI. There's a lot of erosion happening on the site because it gets muddy and then people go further and further out. I noticed there was a mention of footpaths, possibly. Will that happen? And talk of I think the original plans to fence off were a bit frightening for people. But if I've been to lots of places, particularly in national parks, where they pave and then they have fenced off areas with a note saying this is fenced off because it's got rare hog's fennel that feeds the estuarine moth, and I forget what the firefly is called. But so things like that I think could work in a much softer way. So that's all what I wanted to ask, really.
Thank you. The footpath, when we did the first round of consultation, we consulted on the footpath through the middle path, which bizarrely isn't the definitive right of way, but anyway, that was the one that most people walk. And it was very much about trying to improve the conditions of that path to make it a much easier journey for people. We were also talking to people from the care home adjacent to it that were very positive about that. We listened to the consultation and pretty unanimously it was rejected. People did not want to see that path. So we have listened, Councillor Smith, but what I'm thinking is as I mentioned that word trust, and you, as you correctly said, some of these things, it was like we proposed everything in one go. And I can see why, although we consulted separately on them, so we could tease out if there's anything anybody liked, which there wasn't. So that was a clear message. In hindsight, it might have been better to go a bit more softly and take people with us. So I think that's where we are now. And I think once we get people working more closely with us and we have the Friends of group, if we could work with them to think about how that might look, how that might feel for people, I'd be happy to do it. Footpaths on the whole area are extremely complicated. There's nearly as many footpaths as there is sort of designations in wildlife. It's got a real plethora of footpaths, which makes it, again, very complicated. But I do think the one through the middle, it could be a really interesting one to look at improving at the right time. So we'd be very positive to do it, but I don't want users to think we've ignored what they've told us previously.
Councillor Butman.
Yeah, no, it's just a quick thing, really. So the management plan that you've got here all sort of tabled out and everything, would you put together a nicer looking sort of leaflet that could be put online saying, because obviously when people see cuttings and mowings going on, they get a bit concerned. And so you can like balance and sort of justify what you're doing. And in fact, actually, and then going on from that, I mean, even when the council, when we were doing the pollard in the trees, etc., why trees are pollarded, just put more useful information out rather than you seeing cutting going on in these sort of areas. Thanks.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Buckman. I think that is a really good idea. I think we could definitely produce something which is a bit more like a coffee table supplement, so to speak, rather than this full-blown, quite technical management plan for what is a very technical site. So I'm sure that's something that we could do. We've also been looking at the signage on the site, and we've heard a lot about that today. We heard a lot about that in our consultation as well, about the nature of communication and the message, and trying to be, again, warmer, a bit softer, a bit more inclusive, rather than no, no, no. So well, hopefully, very, very soon, there'll be new signs going up, information boards on the site to help explain to people in a bit more infographics why the site is important and what we're doing. And there would definitely be opportunity to put more seasonal signage up there. So both of those I'll be very happy to take on board. Thank you.
I don't see any other speakers, but I'd just like to say it is an excellent report, and thank you. I think that should be recorded for the minutes. It's a really high quality report, and I agree there's some really lovely photos in it as well, which really helps bring it alive. I think as there are no other contributions, we can take, we've taken general comments. I don't think there's any specific proposals that we've heard. So we'll just take a vote by general assent. If everyone is content, we can take a vote by general consent. No one intends to vote against.
Just a quick comment. I mean, I briefly mentioned about a recommendation to note about the entire coast and treating this site as one part of that entire coastline, just as a prompt, if you like, to going forwards for when other sites are brought before us.
A prompt for that
there's a kind of
really.
Yeah, you need to kind of begin to set the skeleton of the framework along the coastline. So, and I think Councillor Carnick pretty much touched on it as well. Thank you.
Certainly be recorded in the minutes. Yep. We'll take recorded votes. Sorry, show of hands, as there are no one voting against. So all four. I've not been notified of any urgent business to be dealt with in public, and there is no need to exclude the press and public under Section 100 of the Local Government Act. And I don't believe there's any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions of Local Government Act 1972 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000. So the next meeting will be on Thursday, the 28th of March, 2024. Thank you, everyone, including our public speakers, and everyone who's